Hey, what's up,
Hey,
everybody? How's everybody doing? Um, Welcome. This is episode 3 of our Learn Live series on building intelligent apps and running them on AKS. My name is Paul Yu. I am a cloud native developer advocate at Microsoft, and it's been a whole lot of fun doing these Learn Live sessions. But today we have a very special guest with us. We have, drumroll please, Mr. Steve Buchanan, author of, I don't know, countless books. I don't even know how many books you wrote, Steve, or how many plural sites you put together. But why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself for everybody here?
yeah, thanks, Paul. Excited to be on here with you today and going through one of my favorite technologies, AKS, and a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
Steve Buchanan here, author of books, Pluralsight courses, blogger, and principal program manager here at Microsoft.
Nice, nice, nice. Thanks for being here with us today. Um, we also have in the background, we have a friend of ours, Steve Morawski. He's producing the show. He's manning the chat window. So please, let's make this session as interactive as possible. This is intended to be like a code along or a follow along session. And so if you have any questions along the way or any questions around the technology in general, just go ahead and drop them into the whatever comment window. I think this thing is being streamed on multiple platforms. So just drop a comment in and we will get to those questions for you.
Awesome.
All right. So, Steve, what are we going to be learning today?
Yeah, so today we're going to look at just a bundle of technologies, right, that we have at Microsoft, all around helping folks like scale, test their application, make sure it's resilient, right, if there's failures and things like that. And then we're going to pull it all together and look at automating some of this with GitHub Actions. So some really cool stuff coming up. Some of the tools are, in Azure, and some of the tools are open source. And so it's going to be a really action-packed and exciting time. And Paul's going to take us through that. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
Before we dive into the actual workshop piece, I just want to give a little overview of Playwright.
Hmm.
And so Playwright is a automation framework that you can use for end-to-end testing of your web applications. And it's cross browser, right? So it's going to cover all those browsers. So if you have a variety of browsers that you're using in your organization, you can do that testing to make sure your users are going to have good experience, right? And then it has a single API capability, so you can write the tests, the scripts for the tests one time, and then that'll work across all those browsers. It's cross-plat, so it's going to work on whatever platform you're using. And then it's also cross-language, which I think is huge, right? So if you're writing web apps in Python or JavaScript or something else, you can use this testing framework.
Yeah. And for those that are been in the web testing space for a little while, you may have heard of tools like Selenium for automated UI testing. So this is kind of like I would call like a more modern version of that. So
Yeah, definitely. And the last thing is that this is open source, so go out there, try it out. And Paul's actually going to dive into it and show us what this looks like.
yeah, cool. So let's go ahead and do that. So I want to say at the beginning of the slide there, we had a QR code, and I see the URL kind of scrolling across the bottom there. So this is where you can follow along. So go ahead and open up your web browser and navigate to that AKA MS link to follow along. What that URL will take you to is this workshop content that we have prepared for you all to actually get you introduced to these tools, installed in your machine, and get you familiar with it. So let's just go ahead and dive right into it. First thing we're going to do is make sure that we have all of the requirements in place. Now, remember, this is a whole series on building intelligent apps and running them on AKS. And so we're going to be deploying that same AKS store demo app that we've been deploying pretty much every week up until now. So if you recall, in episode 1, we deployed the store application, bolted on AI. And then in episode 2, we actually secured the connectivity from AKS to Azure OpenAI using workload identity. And so today we're going to use that same exact application, but we're going to test it for end-to-end testing, making sure it's scalable and making sure it's resilient. So we're going to need all the same kind of tools that we've been using thus far. So you need Azure subscription, number 1. Number 2, you need to have your subscription whitelisted for Azure OpenAI. And if you don't have your subscription whitelisted for Azure OpenAI, no problem. You can still follow along with the lab. You just won't be able to test certain things, especially around the product description generator.
And Paul,
Yeah.
for anyone that's watching, if they missed the previous Learn Lives, you can go watch the recordings, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So
And maybe Steve could put a link in the chat, or we'll make sure you get the link to the previous episode, so you can
yeah,
make sure you
yeah,
follow along.
yeah. I'll make sure that the link is. I think that's it. I just sent it to Steve in the background there. But let's see. Yes, definitely catch the recordings if you need to get caught up. But it's not necessarily a prerequisite for this because we're going to be standing all this stuff from scratch again. So
Nice.
yeah. So we're going to need Azure CLI, Visual Studio Code. And if you don't have Visual Studio Code already installed, I'm like, where have you been? This is like this is like the editor to use. I don't use any other editor but this these days. So
Yeah,
and
even if you're not going to get it for this, just like go get it, because you'll use it in the future for tons of stuff. So go
oh
get it.
yeah, it's so extensible, and we're gonna demonstrate that with the Playwright extension. So go ahead and just click on that link, and you can install it right from here. It'll install into your VS Code, but I'll also show you how you can do it like within VS Code. And Playwright is actually built on top of, or actually built with Node.js, and so you will need Node.js to install. And then, of course, Git, right? Because we're working with source code and repos and all that stuff. I will note that all of our examples here, they're written for Bash. So typically anything like cloud native or anything that I do, really, it's all been Bash. And so if you don't have Bash, that's okay. Use Windows Terminal, use WSL, or even the Cloud Shell, right? So there's plenty of options. Me personally, I work on a Mac, so it's a little easier for me. But yes, definitely Windows Terminal and WSL are awesome options. So let's go ahead and let's do this. And I'm going to be flipping between screens here. So just bear with me. First thing you need to do is open your terminal and do an AZ login so that you can log into your Azure subscription. I've already done that. So I'm not going to do that here. The next thing you need to do is you need to clone this repo. Okay. So you can literally, and if you notice, you see this little square over here? You can click that button. It'll copy that command, and then you can paste it into your terminal window because we don't want to be typing this stuff because we might accidentally mistype something.
Less mistakes, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So what you're going to do is you're going to clone that repo, and then you're going to drop into the repo's directory. From there, we're going to just get some Azure resources spun up. This workshop is more around how to use the tools, not necessarily how to provision the Azure resources. And so Steve has been awesome, and he put together all of these bicep templates for us so that we can deploy our entire environment and stand it up. But it does take around 11-ish minutes to deploy. So you just have to be a little patient there. What I'll do is
that was the other Steve.
the other Steve, yeah, Steve Morawski in the background. That's
yeah,
yeah. So what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and I'll copy this command here. What this is going to do is create a resource group for me, and that resource group is going to be called Testing AKS AI. So let me go ahead and jump over to my VS Code editor, and again, I'm already in my repo, and so I'll just do that. And resource groups, they tend to deploy very quick. So there we go. So once you have the resource group created, the next thing that you need to do is you'll need to drop in to this folder inside the repo called IAC. IAC is for infrastructure as code. You'll need to give it a deployment name, and you can update these to whatever you want, but I mean, or you can stick with whatever's in there. So AKS store AI. And then what you'll do is you'll need to deploy the entire bicep template. So inside the IAC folder, there's a file called main.bicep, and that'll deploy and provision the Azure resources. And here's one thing to look out for. So Steve Morawski got really fancy with the bicep, and he put a lot of like conditional logic into the template. And so you can see the parameters down here. You can see that we are conditionally deploying Azure Load Test, conditionally deploying chaos testing, and a few other things. So if I could scroll it over, conditionally deploying OpenAI and deploying a model. So what that means is if you already have your subscription whitelisted for Azure OpenAI, just leave this alone. Don't change anything. If you do not have Azure OpenAI whitelisted in your subscription, just deploy without this stuff, right? So you can actually just take this out of your command, okay? And I'll show you that in a second. So I'll copy that command, and let's get a fresh terminal here. So what you can do is if you do not have, oops, sorry for the jumping around. If you do not have your subscription whitelisted just yet, you can literally delete it and run it just like that, okay? I do have it whitelisted in my subscription, so I'm just going to go ahead and deploy this. So now this takes a while. This takes like 11 minutes or so, okay? So we'll just let that kind of run, and then I'll show you what you get on the other end of it, because I've already provisioned this prior to coming to this workshop. So if I go to my Azure portal, and if I click, so typically I'll drop into here, and resource groups is always where I go. So resource groups, because everything is all neatly packed into a resource group. I have my own resource group that I provisioned ahead of time. And inside of that resource group, I have a bunch of resources. So if I can toggle some of this stuff away, oh, looks like it can't toggle it. But I'll just quickly walk through what we have here. So we have Azure OpenAI. And of course, I need to scroll down a little bit. I think the most important part here, right? One of the most important things is we have our Kubernetes service. We have our load testing. Oh, hey, look, the managed identity. So the thing that we did last week in episode number 2, that's here. And we have a few other things. Oh, yes, we have Chaos, Grafana, and load testing. So we have a bunch of stuff in here. And feel free to use that template as an example for any of your future deployments when it comes to AKS and its related resources. So that's what we have, okay? Now, let's flip back over to the instructions. Once you are logged in, or once you have all of the resources deployed in Azure, you need to gain access to your cluster, okay? And you do that by running this AZ AKS get credentials command. Okay. And let me do that, but I need to modify that because I'm connecting to the cluster that I previously made, not the cluster that's currently in the oven right now.
And Paul, before you move on,
Yeah.
what is the code? If you could flip back, just
Mhm.
in case someone doesn't know, what is the code above what you copied? What is that doing?
Ah, yes. So when we do the AZ get credentials command, we're passing in the resource group, which I think was testing AKS AI, but we don't have the cluster name yet. Like we don't know what that name is because it's just a random name that's kind of baked into the Azure bicep. So what we can do is we can actually query the deployment, right? So we're doing an AZ deployment group show, and we're asking it, hey, can you give me the AKS name, the value of that? And so that's being set as the cluster name. And that's where we are using it to get us the AKS credential or the AKS name to get the credentials.
That's awesome. So now that cluster name becomes a variable, and we can keep reusing that throughout the rest of our code, right?
That's correct. That's
Awesome.
correct. So, but remember, let's see, that's not done yet. Remember, I pre-baked this stuff ahead of time, so I don't have those variables handy. So that's an easy enough resource group name. So I'll just have to hard code this real quick. If you are just following along with the lab steps at home, you don't need to do all this stuff. So I'm just doing this because I don't want it to interfere with my current deployment. So resource group. And if you're paying attention, oh no, I don't want all that. My resource group was just learn live. So I have my variable set, and I'm just going to copy this command only because that's all I need really. And what this command does is it actually downloads the kube config file into your local machine so that when you want to use kubectl, which is the command line interface for interacting with Kubernetes, it has the credential files locally on your machine so you can authenticate. And if you don't have kubectl, do you remember that handy command, Steve, on how to install it?
I do not off the top of my head. I always have to go look it up.
Yeah. So you could go out to and just do a Bing search or Google search and look up, install kubectl. The
I
cool thing
usually have
is,
it. So, oh, there it is. Steve posted it there, so it's right there on the screen.
yeah. So if you don't have the CLI already, there's a handy AZ CLI command that'll install it for you. So you don't have to go out and search and digging through the interwebs and whatnot. So you could do that. So I have it installed, and I'm not going to install it here. What I can do is I can make sure I have access to it. So I can do something like cluster info. You might be wondering what that K command is. Quick tip, I should say pro tip. When you're working with kubectl, just Google search Kubernetes cheat sheet. Do this every time I set up a new machine or if I'm working. No, that's not.
Oh,
How did it take me to Amazon?
I,
Kubernetes cheat sheet.
yeah, I think it posted an ad at the top there, so you gotta watch out for the ads.
Got me. They got me. Okay,
There we
here
go.
it is. This is where I want to be. This is what you should do for your kubectl. Kubernetes cheat sheet. Well, it's a cheat sheet, so it has like a list of all the handy commands that you can use for Kubernetes. But the cool thing is that it also sets you up for kubectl auto completion and aliases, because I'm lazy. I don't like to type kubectl all the time. I just want to type K. And so this will help you set up your shell. Doesn't matter if you're using bash, zsh, or fish. There's instructions for all that. So I highly recommend that you do this and set up your terminal in that way. Okay.
Great tip.
Yeah.
And
So
there's the link. You posted the link for that cheat sheet. So
yeah,
be
yeah.
sure
Do that.
you all bookmark that.
Yeah, yeah. Because I don't like typing, and every keystroke counts. Every saving of a keystroke counts. All right. Let's see. And so this is why I'm typing get, K get PO or K get, deploy, because I'm also shorthanding my resources. That's how lazy I am. I could do K get PODS, right? But I'd rather just do K get PO. Okay, so there's nothing deployed in my cluster now. And the next step here is to actually deploy the base store application. Okay, this is the application, everything about the application except for the AI, and we're going to tack that on in just a minute. Okay. What we will do here is copy that command. I think it's saved. We're going to deploy the store. Got a lot of stuff coming in. Okay. And then we're going to grab the Azure OpenAI API key and the Azure OpenAI endpoint. Okay. And we'll do that using the same method that we did earlier, right? We're going to go ask our bicep deployment. We're going to ask it for what that particular value should be and stuff it into a local variable, right? Now, what do I need here? Because I am deviating a little bit from this deployment. And I've done this earlier. There we go. So my deployment name was learn live. So I need to hard code things because I'm deviating a little bit. So I think that's what I need. And I'll go ahead and do that. I'm getting my Azure OpenAI API key. I'm also getting the endpoint name. And there we go. I'm not going to show the API key on screen, but I will print this out just to make sure.
And so just so everyone knows, this is similar to what we did earlier to get the cluster name, right? We're
Yes,
actually querying Azure to get that information back.
absolutely. And it said it. So this should align with store 42 HWBM. Wow, that is a resource name. Store 42 HWBM. Okay, yeah, that lines up.
Might need to shorthand that.
Yeah, I'm not typing that at all. Yeah, no way. All right. So I have the variables that I need to actually deploy the AI service now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the kubectl apply command. And typically you would do a -f and then the file name of the YAML. But because we're in a bash shell, we can use what's called here doc syntax and literally take text and kind of stream it into or redirect it into our kubectl apply command. And so that's what this special magic, I call it like magic syntax right here, will do for us. So we're going to redirect all of this text output. And look at here. We have our variables. And so nothing is on screen. It's all in our local variables. And so we feel safe to deploy it this way. And so what we're going to do is deploy all this. So literally, I'm just going to copy this. I definitely don't want to type this. I will click that. And let's see, clear my screen, paste it all in. Look at that. And boom.
Magic.
Yeah, magic indeed. So I think that's the setup. That was a lot. And then it says to open this up in code, but I've been working in VS Code, this whole time. If you don't have the repo in code, you can literally just type code, CODE, space, and then dot, and it'll open VS Code in the current, basically in the current directory that you're in. Okay. So that was a setup. It was a long-winded setup, I know. But
it usually goes a little faster when you are just working through it, but you stepped everyone through it, right? So
yeah.
Yeah.
So now we can start testing, right? Because I don't even know if this app works yet. You know what? let's just make sure all of our pods are good to go. So yeah, that looks good. Everything's running. Virtual worker restarted. I'm not too worried about that. If you're curious about what that is, though, we have basically 2 virtual processes that simulate a customer coming in and ordering stuff, and then a worker processing the orders. So that's what those are. So if these are restarting, I'm not too worried about that. I would be worried, though, if the AI service isn't working or if the product service wasn't working, then we might be in trouble. But this looks good. I'm pretty confident it's going to work, but we haven't tested it yet. We're going to test it right now. All right. So here's where we get started with Playwright. And if you do not already have Playwright, did you know that you can use VS Code to install Playwright because of the extension that we installed? And so let me talk about that a little bit. If you go over to your activity bar in VS Code, over in the left-hand side over here, click on extensions and just do a search for Playwright. And you can see I did the search already, but if you just type it in, it'll take you here, Playwright test for VS Code. If it was not installed, this would be an install button. So just click the install. Sometimes you might need to reload the VS Code editor, sometimes not. That's okay. So just reload it and you should be good to go. Once you have Playwright installed, the extension, you can actually use the extension to install Playwright. So if you do, I'm looking at my key because I know the key bindings are different. Command-Shift-P on a Mac or Control-Shift-P on a Windows machine. What you will do is it'll launch this command palette, and you can literally start typing Playwright, and you can see that there is a install Playwright button here that you can click. Okay, so you can click that, and it's going to ask you, hey, what browsers do you want to install for, or what browsers do you want to test for? And so the default is all checked. And I'll typically just leave the defaults. It uses TypeScript by default, but if you are more comfortable just with plain old vanilla JavaScript, then feel free to check that checkbox. But once you have all those checked, just hit this OK button and Playwright should be installed. Okay, I already have it installed, so I'm not going to do this. Let's see what the next step should be. So once we have Playwright actually installed in your machine, you have to then install it into your project, right? Because your project needs to know how to interact with the Playwright library. So let's drop into our terminal once again. And let's maximize this, clear that out. So I copied the command. So I'm going to drop into my test folder, which is over here. And then I'm going to do a npm install command. What this will do is it'll use Node's npm package manager to install whatever packages that Playwright needs to execute. Okay. So that went really fast for me because I had already installed it. It might take a minute or so for you. All right. So what do we have next? Haha. So in order for Playwright to test your application, it's going to need to know where that application is. And you can hard code that into your tests. But anytime anybody says hard code something, never a good thing. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use kubectl to get the service, right? So we have a front end and a back end service. So we're going to use kubectl to grab the IP addresses from the service. And because we're using load balancer on the Kubernetes service, what they gave us was a public IP. And we can grab that public IP and store it into a variable and actually dump it into a local env file. So I'll just go ahead and copy that. I'm in the correct directory. And I will literally just paste that command. And I am curious. I want to see what it did. And so I'll just open up my test directory here. And you can see we have a env.playwright local file that just got dropped in. And if I click it, hey, there we go. I'm really curious. I want to see if this is working before we actually run the test. Or should we just go YOLO and run the test? What do you think?
Let's run the test, and then the test will tell us.
Oh yeah. Okay, let's do that. So
I'm confident in you, Paul. I think this is running.
I appreciate
that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Steve. To run the test, you actually need to go into the VS Code activity bar, and you'll see like this little beacon over here, this little test beacon. So just go ahead and click that thing, and it will detect tests that are in your project. And so you can start to traverse through the hierarchy, and you can see that we have a couple of end-to-end tests here. We have an add product, we have product spec, and then we have a couple of tests in here, which I was just messing around with. What I'll do is this. What I'll do is I'll just click this little play button, and I'll test the add product functionality. Okay. So it's running. It's kind of doing its magic behind the scenes.
Passed. 3.8.
Hey, look at that. But how do we know what it did? We can check to see what it did and follow along. There's a button down here called Show Browser, and we can just hit this checkbox. And I'm going to exit full screen because this typically doesn't open all that well if I'm in full screen. So let me run this again. And click that. It's going to, hey, look at that. It's like magic.
Look at that. It walked through the actual test in the browser. So you can see the activity happening.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. Now, that went really fast. Like I didn't even see it. I didn't even see all the clicks that it went through, right?
I saw it at least. So you know it was doing something.
Yeah. So what if you wanted to slow down a little bit so you can inspect it, right? Like, hey, Playwright, you're moving way too fast for me. Let's pump those brakes a little bit. So what we can do is we can actually right click on this particular test, and we can say go to test. Go to test will actually take us into the TypeScript file where the code for the test actually lives. So this gives it step-by-step instructions on how and what it should be doing. And we can treat this like any other, I guess, application code, right? We can set breakpoints over here. And you can see I had a few toggled on. And so I can literally set a breakpoint on the first line for can add product. And then check this out, this little debug button, I can debug the test and actually step through it like any other piece of code, right? So let's go ahead and do that. So I'll hit the debug button. It fired up a web browser. I don't know where it went. But let's see. Can I do that? Aha, there. So let's see. I need to position this so I can see them side by side. Yeah, let's do it like that. Let's step through if my keys are working. So you can see I'm literally doing F10, stepping through, and you can see things are happening there. And so the next one, let me just close this or move this away. Boom. So it's at the add product button. So I click the add product button. And then the next thing it's going to do is it's actually going to start filling in text. So, basically we can see that in the code. So it's going to put in a product name and a price and the keywords. And so I can literally just step through this and you can't really see it. So let me just do that like that. And you can see that it's literally going through and entering the things that I want to test for, right? So there we have it. So this is basically Playwright, and it's a modern way for you to actually do end-to-end testing of your applications. Now, what if you're not a TypeScript developer? Like, I don't know what this is half the time. I don't know what this async or this funky little character does for me. That's okay, because in the past, if you've ever used Selenium before, there was like a recorder. Well, you could do the same thing. You can do the same thing for these particular tests. And so I'm just going to grab this URL here and copy it to my clipboard. I'm going to close that. Let's say you need to record a new test. Let's say you need to create a new test. You can actually record it by clicking this button down here called Record New. So you just click that, and hey, look at that. So a brand new TypeScript file just popped up into my VS Code editor. A browser window also popped up, and here I can actually work with an application. Okay. And as I click through, look at what it's doing in the background there.
It's adding the code for each step. That's
It's
amazing.
literally adding the code. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, this is really good, especially for anyone that's watching that, again, they might not know TypeScript or they might be new to this tool. They
Mm-hmm.
might have been sitting there wondering, like, okay, Paul's showing this really cool stuff.
Yeah.
How do I do it? Right.
Right.
So they can come in and use this recorder to help them get started on
Yeah.
whatever app they're testing.
That's right. That's right. So I'll just close this. I'm not gonna do anything more with that. Let's see. One other thing I wanted to show you is because everything's in code, you can now write your test cases basically the same way you write your code. And so if I go back to my add product use case, you can see that you can start to set variables, and then you can conditionally test for different use cases, right? Remember at the beginning of our deployment, I said you may not have your subscription whitelisted for Azure OpenAI, and therefore you may not be able to click that Ask OpenAI button because the button's not there. Well, you can actually code that logic into your application and basically say, hey, if the Ask OpenAI button is visible, then let's go ahead and do these things and test for it. Otherwise, let's just go ahead and fill in the product description manually and test it that way. So Playwright becomes a very, very powerful tool to keep in your tool belt. And that's pretty much it for there. Steve, what other tools are there?
Yeah, so let's jump back to the slides, and next we're going to actually explore Azure Load Testing. And what is Azure Load Testing? Well, it's a fully managed service that exists in Azure. You can use it to connect to either public or private endpoints on Azure. So I know a lot of organizations out there are using private endpoints,
Mhm.
and that's good. You can still use this to do that load testing. We can connect across environments. So if we're running stuff on other clouds, maybe we're running stuff on premises still, or in hybrid environments, we can do our load testing across any of that.
Nice.
We can generate these load tests quickly and very easily. Paul's going to show you some of that. And we can get up to a very high scale. So if you're a business where maybe you have seasonal times where you have very heavy loads, you want to test your application ahead of time, you can use this to do that and see if your app crashes or goes under, under that heavy load. Maybe you need to adjust scaling, right, on your app. You can also go in and start creating load tests without prior knowledge of the testing tool. So in Azure, and I don't know if Paul's going to show this, but you can actually go in and start to build out the tests using basically the UI in Azure. So if you're brand new to this, it's super easy to really get started.
Oh yeah, yeah. And even if you've been doing this for years, like let's say with the JMeter, you could bring your JMeter files.
Yeah,
There
absolutely.
you go.
Thanks for that tee up. Yeah, so if you have advanced scenarios, or like Paul said, you're used to doing this for a long time, you can bring your JMeter scripts along for the ride.
Yeah.
And then basically, like, you bring the tests and Azure brings the infrastructure. So with
Mhm.
that, we're going to jump back to the actual workshop, and Paul's going to take us through some more live action.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I think the cool thing about that is the testing infrastructure itself. Like, yeah, it's easy to test from my local machine or from like, you know, a handful of machines that we just have dedicated for testing. But what if you want an enormous scale, test? What if you want to test from various geographical locations, right? So this is where cloud scale really comes into play. So let's take a look at the next section, which is testing with Azure Load Testing. And so what we'll do is we'll start with a quick test. And this is what Steve was alluding to. You need zero prior knowledge on load testing to get started. Yeah. So let's see. Do I have the URL handy? I think I still do in my clipboard. So what we're going to do is we're going to flip back over to the Azure portal, and we're going to check out. Actually, that's not the way I wanted to go. I just wanted to go here. What we're going to do is we're going to open up the Azure Load Testing resource, which is inside of your resource group. From there, what you need to do is you need to go to tests, because this is where all your tests will live.
And Paul, just so they know, right? So
Mhm.
if you're using the bicep that comes along with the workshop, it'll provision this Azure load testing for you.
Mhm.
If you have other services outside of this workshop, you could go load this Azure load testing, drop it in a resource group, and start working with it, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the resource could live anywhere really. We just kind of keep it all nice and tidy in this resource group so we can throw everything away when we're done all together.
Spin
Yeah.
up, tear down.
That's what it is. Pets versus cattle, right?
Yep.
Yeah, the cloud native way. Um, Once you're in the test blade, there's a little create button here, and these are the two options that you have to create your load test. You can create a quick test, or you can upload your JMeter file. So let's do this just to start. And so what we'll do is, do I have the? Yes, I do. Okay. What we'll do is we'll test the products API, because on the storefront page, the products are loaded based on the product API. And so pretty sure that's the URL. I'm just going to double check before things start failing on me.
Good call.
Yeah, there we go. That's it. And so all you need to do is specify, how much load do you want to throw at your service. And so you can test for either the number of users that are hitting your web application or the number of requests per second that you want to send to your application. I'll just simulate virtual users, and let's see, let's go with 250.
Nice.
250 virtual users I'm going to try to keep this short, 30 seconds, and 0 ramp up time. Let's see what happens. So 0 ramp up time. So this is like Black Friday style, right? Holidays coming up.
Yeah, everyone's just rushing right to it, right? They
yeah.
want to order those products, like no ramp up time. Let's go.
Or like back in the day, I was a huge sneakerhead, and so when the newest Jordans came out, I was rushing to the website to go order my pair or reserve my pair. So this is kind of like.
So if you're selling sneakers, you want to make sure your site can stand it if as soon as those shoes drop. So
exactly. So let's go ahead and
ahead of the shoe drop. So
yeah, I hope those companies are using this product.
Yeah. Now something we didn't see, Paul, and I don't know if this is a capability on that screen, but can we select the geographies we want our simulated users to come from within the Azure infrastructure?
So not from that particular page. And you know what? That's a good question. I haven't really checked to see if you can configure that. Possibly somewhere in the configuration blade. We can look at that later.
Got it.
But yeah, it wasn't quite there. What we can do though is we can actually check for the different components that we want to test or gather metrics from. And so let's see, what resource group? I did a Learn Live resource group. So let's see, I want to grab metrics from my AKS cluster in Learn Live. And there's always a virtual machine scale set behind the scene. And I need to double check which one it was, because you know what? I'm not sure which one it is. Oh, HWBM. Right, yeah, the 42 HWBM. Yeah, I remember that name. Okay. All right. And you can always filter too. So if some of this stuff gets a little unwieldy, you have a lot of resources, you can use these, I guess, pillboxes, and you can filter. So I'll go ahead and apply those things there. And you can see that, yeah, my product service is behaving pretty well so far. No errors yet. So it's executing the test. I think it reached our virtual max users, and it's starting to come down a little bit. And wow, maybe I should have thrown a whole lot more load at it.
Yeah, this is good though. You can even see like your response times, so you can see how fast your app is actually responding. There's a lot of good data here.
Yeah, there is. And a P90 response time of 5.2 seconds. I think that's good, but not great.
Yeah.
I think the general rule of thumb around web requests is somewhere around the 4-second range. But this tooling here actually gives you insight into that, like how they are behaving under load. And so we can probably come to the conclusion that 250 concurrent users hitting this particular service all at the same time is about our upper limit in performance, right?
Yeah.
And you have to remember, in our deployment, we only have one replica of this product service. So, and that's the beauty of Kubernetes, is that you can easily scale out or horizontally scale out your number of replicas. And so this will kind of give you an indication on how many replicas you probably need to serve the number of requests that you're anticipating, right? So this can take a little while. Let's see if I have a pre-baked response somewhere. Yeah, you're getting a ton of information. So you know how when I added the app components, so you're starting to see like pod status ready, the disk, the IO on the disk, percentage CPU, and you can see here our virtual machine scale set is not even being pegged at all. So from an infrastructure perspective, we're looking good. We'll probably have a lot of room for growth here. So all we would need to do is basically scale our replicas up and we get a lot better performance. Now, let me just quickly show you how you would scale manually. and I say manually because this is probably not the best way to scale, but it is a way to scale. So if I do a kget deploy, and let's just say product service, you can see I have 1 of 1 ready. If I wanted to scale the deployment up, I can set this to, let's say, 100, or pop quiz, how many pods or how many replicas can we run in AKS? We should have like a quiz window or a poll.
Yeah, I'm sure Steve will track the responses and let us know if anyone's right there.
The answer to that is you can get up to 250 pods, you know, on a particular node or in total. But I won't go that far. I'll just say 25. And so what we did here is we basically telling Kubernetes, hey, I need 25 copies of that product service. And so you can see that it's starting to deploy them, and it's starting to, you know, as they're ready, it's going to add them behind the load balancer, excuse me, the Kubernetes service, and the Kubernetes service is able to balance traffic between all the pods.
And lightning fast as far as like adding.
That was really fast. Yeah.
So yeah, if you're running your site and you're, you know, you are experiencing issues, you're seeing that you can scale things as needed, like super fast.
Yeah.
The beauty of
look at that. We were getting errors. It just wasn't reporting fast enough. So now that I scaled up to 25, and if I reran that, we should see those errors kind of drop down to a more respectable level. Yeah. Cool. So that's how you just quickly get started with Azure Load Test. You can see it was super simple. Now, what's the other option that we have? So we have a way, and we mentioned it, we have a way to, you know, I'm just going to scroll away from all this stuff. So this is all instructions on what you need to do. So if you're following along at home, or if you're just catching this on recording, just follow along and enter those values in. You'll be good. The other option here is to use JMeter, right? So we can use our JMeter file and upload it to Azure Load Test and run our test that way. Now, when was the last time you looked at a JMeter file, Steve?
Can't even remember.
Oh man, when I looked at it, I was like, oh geez, this is bringing back memories. Let's go see what that looks like. It's a JMX file, and that JMX file is in XML. Yeah.
But most of
Yeah.
my days are, well, not even spent in JSON anymore. But if I'm down
Yeah, right. Yeah.
JSON, not XML.
Yeah. It went
So,
XML, JSON, YAML, and now
oh
we're
yeah,
going back to
yeah.
XML.
Most of the time it's YAML now, which is like,
Yeah.
let's not
Yeah.
even go there.
Yeah. That's not, yeah. But I mean, JMeter is still a heavily used tool, and JMeter is cool in that it has a UI. I don't have JMeter installed on my local machine here, but it has a UI, and you can actually build out your test plans using the JMeter UI, and you can actually save that as a JMX file, and put it in your repo like this, or put them wherever you need to, and then you can literally upload that. And let's go see how that works. So if I jump back over to the Azure portal, I'll let that test kind of do its thing. I'll go back to Azure Load Test and click on tests. And I'll click this create button again, but this time we're going to upload a JMeter script. Okay. I'll just keep the name as is. I'm not very creative today. I wish there was an Ask AI button over here on the side that says, hey, give me a nice creative name. So test plan. Here is where I want to upload my file. So if I open up my file explorer here, I don't think they call it a file explorer in Mac, do they?
I don't think so. It's gonna look different on, if you're using a Windows machine out there, that's gonna look
Yeah,
different. But
yeah. I still call it file explorer because I
yeah.
come from the Windows. Okay, so choose your file and add it in. And one thing that I used to do all the time, and it yells at you about it, says, please click the upload button because it's not uploaded just by clicking the file. Okay, so I'll hit that upload, and there we go. We see that it's 100% uploaded. Okay, so from here, yep, it's uploaded. We can click on the parameters tab, and there's a bunch of environment variables that you need to fill in for this. And so I'm literally going to just copy and paste this over here. So this is like watching Paul copy paste. How fast can I copy paste with X number of people
This is where
watching?
we should have like AI just handle this task for you, right?
Yeah,
Like somehow,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Let's see, how many more do we have? We have a few more. So
Not too bad. So
yeah, yeah. I appreciate everybody's patience through this. And I'm just gonna key in some values. So I'm just grabbing the name so I make sure I have the name right. All right, let's see. Five products is that? And I should do 10 products. Protocols HTTP. Boom. HTTP and domain. Oof. Where? There we go. I have it. Boom. Grab that. I thought there was a path I can put in, but oh no, we're just testing the store admin, right? Because the test was called store admin. Okay.
so
Ramp up time. Ramp up time is
and duration 120.
120. Thank you. So the test is actually going to run for 2 minutes here. And ramp up time is particularly important when it comes to load testing. I've seen cases where, obviously you do want to test for the most extreme use case scenario and just say 0 ramp up time. I'm just going to flood my system. But that can, depending on how your application is built, it can really hammer your app and put a undue amount of stress on it, especially and back in the days when I used to run a .NET shop, or excuse me, when I used to run a .NET e-commerce platform. We used to run a CMS, a content management system,
Mm.
And content management systems, you might know how long they take to warm up and actually be ready. And so not having a ramp up period really killed our load test,
Mm.
because in real life, we're not always flooded. I mean, there are periods of time where we may get flooded with a number of requests. Let's say we're the newest shoe release or whatever. I mean, that happens, but generally, you have like a gradual number of users coming in, and so this ramp up period is important to kind of simulate that as well. And so here we're saying let's have a 10-second delay between the number of users.
It's good to know.
Yeah. Um, start with 5 users.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. So that was it. Basically, it's just getting these environment variables configured. That seems to be the tedious work. But in general, the overall test itself was all stored inside that JMX file. And we just uploaded it. And there we have it. Let's see what else we have here. Haha. Number of engine instances. Okay. This is where you can actually configure how many machines you want to test from. And it looks like I am going to be testing. So basically, where the Azure Load Test service resides in terms of the location that we deployed it into, that's where it's going to test from. So if you wanted to test from different geographic locations, you probably want to deploy Azure Load Testing Service in those different regions. So here we have one instance. So we're only going to test from one machine. We can bump this up to as many as you want. And if you want to go crazy and go all the way up to 45, have at it. Just remember, this equals more compute, right? And more compute is, more money.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I'll just leave it at one. I like to save a little money, and I don't really need all that infrastructure at this point. So here, this is where you can actually test your, how you mentioned public and private.
Yeah.
So this is where you would actually configure to reach private endpoints. What else do we have? So this is cool right here. Fast fail, right? The last thing you want is for your load test to kick off on a bunch of infrastructure and your application is failing, and it's failing fast, and it's failing hard, and you just want to stop the test at that point. You don't want it to continue and hammer your system. And so here you can add additional criteria to kind of stop the test based on certain conditions, right? So latency, or the number of errors, or the number of requests per second is not getting what you are anticipating. This is where you can configure that load test to just halt. And you don't have to pay for that compute anymore. Otherwise, that test's going to run to the end, and you're going to have like a bazillion errors or whatever, right? Yeah. And then monitoring of components. So what you can do, same deal here. You can actually, where is 42 HWBM? So we could test our OpenAI. Where's the other one? This one, our virtual machine scale set. And we had one more, the AKS cluster. Yeah. So boom, review and create. So this is everything. I wish it showed us all of our parameters, but it doesn't. That's okay though. And we can say create. And then there we have it. I set this up so that as soon as I create the load test, it's going to kick it off immediately. And so that's basically what's going to do in the background there. So that was Azure load testing in a nutshell. I'm not going to sit and wait for this to complete. Let's move on. What's the other tool that we have?
Yeah, so let's so this one I'm really excited about. It's really, really cool. It's Chaos Studio in Azure. And this is going to help you test your resilience of your app, right? In your architecture, whatever you have powering your application. And so this will go through and like inject faults and try to like basically battle test your application, right? So you could use this so you can measure and understand how your app will and how your infrastructure will hold up if something happens, right? Something fails. And there's a concept in this Azure Chaos Studio called chaos experiments. Essentially, what these are templates of chaos, right? That you want to cause against your application or your infrastructure. And there's actions within these experiments that it can do. And so here's kind of a framework, right, for your your testing, or testing is maybe not the right word, but um, yeah, testing the resiliency of your application. You'll have a hypothesis of what might happen, what are the failures that could happen, and then you'll
Mhm.
set that up in an experiment. You can run it, do the analysis, make the improvements to your application, and then hopefully you'll have a
A
bulletproof
more
application
resilient.
at the end of it, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the that's the idea. And so there's also something in here called fault libraries or fault library, and those are faults, like things you can, like faults you can inject to cause the havoc in your infrastructure and with your application. And we have some screenshots here. So this is just an example of a couple of experiment templates. So you could see, like, you could simulate in Azure Active Directory, which it has a new name now. Uh, but the new
I'm
name is,
always catching myself.
yeah, like we need to. It has a new name now, but we could simulate an outage there, and we could also simulate like a zone being down, which is really cool because hopefully that never happens, right?
Mhm.
Um, but if it does, our app will be ready. And then
Right.
here's a screenshot of some of the faults that we can basically inject, and you could see a number of AKS ones in there, right? So you can do things like you can take out pods,
Mhm.
see what,
Yeah.
see what happens to your environment, make sure things are still running.
Yeah.
Uh, you can also do other things, like there's DNS failure, right? Which we all know DNS never fails, and it's never the
Oh,
cause of like major
it's
outages, right? That
that
never.
never happens.
But
Yeah.
in a world where that does happen, we could test ahead of time to make sure our app would stay up for that, right?
Yeah.
So Paul's going to take us back into some live action and explore Chaos Studio. I highly recommend, you spin this up. This is an Azure service, and start using it. You can use it
Yeah.
on AKS, VMs, and a number of other essentially targets within Azure. It's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially as we get into like microservices architecture, where components are pretty much anywhere and everywhere, either in Azure, in virtual machines. I meant in Azure, like PaaS services or on virtual machines. And so we just we're being the how do you want to say it? It's like the bull in the china shop, where we're just breaking things. Like we're pulling the plugs on certain things, and seeing how your application behaves,
See
so
what
that we can.
happens. Yeah.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
one of the beauty of Chaos Studio is, like, in the past, you would have to deal with things when it actually happens, when your application breaks or infrastructure is falling apart, right? And we've all been
Hmm.
there, where it's like you're scrambling, you're trying to figure things out, and you have
Yeah.
real customers waiting, and the company's losing money minute by
Yeah.
minute or hour by hour,
Yeah.
while you're trying to fix things. Now you can simulate that in dev environments or test environments to see what happens to your application and not lose money, right? Okay.
Or even in production environments.
Or you can do it in and yep.
Yeah. Um, that's
And you
that's
should do it
really
in
trusting
production.
your stuff, right? Like you really have to trust your stuff, um, to be able to test in production. And how do you build trust? You build trust by going
Using
through it. You have to go through the fire, you know. And we'll take a look at it right now. So, um, we're gonna be testing this, like Steve mentioned. Like, you can test against Azure faults, certain things that are outside of your, let's say, Kubernetes cluster. But here we're going to test more specifically a pod fault, right? We're going to test to see, or we're going to basically pull the plug on one of our pods. And remember, we were running one replica of all of our pods. I think I scaled it up, but let me scale it back down just to kind of show you. But yeah, so let's do this. So Azure Chaos Studio actually uses an open source project called Chaos Mesh. Now, this is a project within the CNCF, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. I can't remember the status on it. I think last time I checked, it was incubating. It might be further along now. But this is basically resources that you can deploy into your Kubernetes cluster that can simulate certain fault activities, within your cluster. And so in this case, we are going to demonstrate how you can simulate a pod just, not being available or not being responsive. Okay. So what we're going to need to do is, because Chaos Mesh is Kubernetes specific, we're going to need to install components into that. And we are going to use Helm for this. I can't remember. Did I talk about Helm? Was Helm at the very beginning of the...
Maybe give like a 10-second what is Helm?
Yeah.
For those out there watching.
Yeah. I'll have to have you keep me honest, Steve, but Helm is basically like, what's the way to describe it? It's almost like a...
Think
Go ahead.
of like a package manager for Kubernetes. Like,
absolutely. Yeah.
Super simple way to kind of think about it.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about, I use Linux systems all the time. It's like apt-get, right?
Yeah.
apt-get
Exactly.
install a package.
Yeah.
And so Helm is a way for you to package your Kubernetes manifest. And you saw how we were doing all the YAML deployments, and we're filling in the the API key and the endpoint URL and things like that. Well, Helm will allow you to package all that up, parameterize some of this stuff, templatize it, and even introduce like conditional logic in the way you deploy things. So that's basically what Helm is. And if you don't know by now, pretty much a lot of the open source toolings, out there in the Kubernetes ecosystem, I mean, there's probably a Helm chart for it, and that's what they call it, Helm chart, right? So it all follows along with the whole nautical theme of Kubernetes in general. So
yeah, and that's the other nice thing is there are libraries out there of Helm charts. So typically if there's an add-on for Kubernetes, there's probably a Helm chart out there for it.
Yeah. So if you don't already have Helm, just head over to this URL. It's pretty easy to remember. Just helm.sh, and head over to the docs, and you can actually install installing Helm right down here. So you can install it from a script, install it through a package manager, brew. That's how I installed it, right? So you can go about it that way. When you want to install a Helm chart, you need to add the repo, because these things are artifacts that are packaged by each vendor. And so that artifact, you need to add that to your Helm repo. And so we're going to do a Helm repo add. We're going to add that particular chart into our repo. And just to be safe, we'll do a Helm repo update just to ensure that we're getting all the latest changes. And when you do this, this is kind of like a apt-get update command, just to make sure. And it's going to update across all the repos that you already have in your Helm, repository there. And then what we need to do is we need to create a new namespace that this Chaos Mesh is going to be deployed into. Okay. And then from there, we'll go ahead and install that. So let me just go ahead and copy all these commands, and we'll clear. Oh, you know what? I need to scale this down real quick. So let me do that.
Don't forget that. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you'll inject some faults in there, and then
Yeah.
it won't do what you're expecting.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Exactly. Okay. So I'm just gonna copy all that. Happy helming. I like that. With the emojis. Love it. Okay. We'll just give this a second to deploy. And then once it's in there, we should have a command that comes back. And I'll just show you what that is. So what it does is it actually deploys a whole bunch of resources into your cluster, and everything is going to be in the chaos testing namespace. Okay. From there, what we're going to do is we're going to open an experiment in the Azure portal. Chaos Studio is a part of the Azure portal, and as part of that bicep deployment that we had you deploy at the top of the show, it includes this experiment. And so I'll walk you through that. Let's just quickly check. Aha, yeah. So there we go. So it tells you, hey, run this command just to make sure everything is running. So I will listen and do that. Hey, look at that. So all of our components are running. So that's cool. So now what we'll do is we'll head over to the Azure portal and we will take a look at the chaos experiment that has been provisioned for us. So if I go back to my resource group and I head over to the chaos experiment, and if you hit the edit button, you can kind of see what it's doing. So here we can have multiple steps, multiple branches. We can coordinate a whole bunch of different things. We can add certain faults, and this is the screenshot that Steve was showing us. So we can inject DNS, because DNS never fails.
Never.
They're reliable. Kernel chaos, network chaos. I mean, there is so much chaos that we could bring to our cluster using this tool. I love this thing. So I'll just close that and I'll show you what we're going to do here. So we're doing pod chaos, and inside pod chaos, JSON is the new XML. And so what we have here is we have defined what sort of chaos we want to introduce. In this case, it's going to be a pod failure. The mode is 1, meaning we're only going to pick on one pod. You can also set this to a percentage if you wanted to, and you can set it for duration. So I want my pod to fail for a duration of 60 seconds and, see what happens after that, right? The selector is super important. This is how you choose which pod you want to disrupt. And so we're choosing the default namespace, and we're using a label selector where the app is equal to product service. And you may have not caught that, but in all the YAML manifests, typically what you'll see is when you define a deployment, they usually have metadata in there, and there'll usually be a label, and that label identifies what particular, what type of application it is. And so for our product service, our label, the key value pair is app and product service. So that's what kind of lets us know that that pod belongs to this product service. So basically it's going to say, hey, find me a pod, find me one pod, and we'll go cause some chaos. Right? So you might be wondering, how do I even set this up? Now, over in the chaos mesh website, basically they have kind of instructions or examples on all the different sorts of chaos you can cause in your Kubernetes cluster. And there's actually a chaos mesh dashboard that's inside your cluster, right? That you can gain access to. And let me show you that real quick. This is not part of the instructions, and so I'm deviating just a little bit. And this is the
after that, Paul, I think
Mhm.
we're getting a little tight on time, so we may need to
Oh,
speed through this just a little.
okay. Yeah. I would say, and I'll drop this in here because this shows you all the instructions that you would need to view your dashboard. But I would say this, it's a great way to just visually create the experiment. The experiment will give you a YAML file, and then you can literally use any YAML to JSON converter, and it'll give you that spec that you need to put it into the Azure Chaos
Mhm.
Studio. Yeah. So
Great
that's
tip.
how you can create your test. Okay. So let's just go ahead and run this. And yeah, I know we are tight on time. So literally, we can start this and we'll eventually start to see it do its thing. And the idea here is will start to see it's waiting to start. But the idea here is that if we go back, remember going all the way back to our Playwright tests, um, because we have one product service and we're injecting a fault into that product service, we are anticipating that this product test here, if I go to the test, um, we're anticipating that this particular test is going to fail because our application won't be able to retrieve the products from the product service. Okay. And so what this will identify is, hey, we have a gap. If one pod goes down and it takes our entire site down, that's a problem. How are we going to fix it? Right. So that's kind of the general idea there.
That's because we're essentially taking down the pod that runs our product service.
Yes. And we only have one, remember?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So you never want to run this. I'm just curious. I'm just going to run this, see what happens. Okay. Let's run it again. Because remember, it's only going to take it down for a couple of seconds. So maybe I missed my boat.
Yeah, that short window of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It only took it down for a couple of seconds there. But that's the general idea there. Um, yeah. I know we are getting close to the end of time. So, I mean, that was it. There is more content inside the workshop. And there's one thing that I did not touch on just yet, and only because there's just so many tools to go over. But you can actually put it all together inside of a GitHub action, right? We've done all this manually using all the different tools. Um, but what you want to do is you want to automate this so that anytime you do a pull request and you're merging code, that you're testing this stuff continuously and in an automated way. And so Steve Murawski has put together this pretty amazing GitHub workflow that actually tests for all this stuff in a number of combinations, right? So we can do chaos with load testing, chaos with Playwright. We can do a normal, non-chaos test, load testing and Playwright. So we can test this pretty much any which way, and we can do it all in an automated fashion. So with that, I mean, I think that's a lot of tools to take in, but I think it's all necessary tools, right? Because we're getting end-to-end testing, scaling, and testing for resiliency.
Yeah, and maybe Steve could put the URL on the screen for like GitHub Actions so folks can go and dive into that more. I mean, there's so much you can do with GitHub Actions. It's really great technology to ramp up on as well.
Absolutely. And they're all down here at the end of the lab as well. So yeah. So just in closing, I know we have a few minutes left. Want to take that, Steve?
Yeah, definitely. I'll take that. And there's the URL on the screen for the GitHub Actions. We'll flip back to the deck here, and then we'll wrap things up. And so, what we went through today was a lot. I mean, there's a lot to digest from what Paul took us through and the new tools that we learned about that are available from Microsoft here. So we dove into Playwright. We looked at like, okay, how do we run tests? How does that work? How do we create a test? How do we use the recorder to create a test if we don't know TypeScript? Um, how do we do load testing using the Azure load test, right? We went and ran that. We also looked at like using the interface in Azure to create the test and run it. And then we looked at some of the metrics we can see while the test is running, which was awesome. Really helps us to tweak our application and infrastructure as needed. And then we looked at JMeter, right? Uploading a JMeter file to run the test from that. So that was really cool. And then we got time to dive into Chaos Studio, which is really cool. You can go in and start breaking things right in your application, which is always a good thing, and do it in production. And then we didn't dive so much into GitHub Actions, but GitHub Actions is kind of that glue that can bring these things together and automate everything. That way, when you're running pull requests, you're working through those tests you need, the load balancing, and even testing the resiliency of your application, right? And
Yeah.
then underneath all of that was AKS and the AKS demo store running on top of AKS. So a lot of really cool stuff here. So that was a lot. Go through the workshop on your own. You can go at your own pace. You can pull this
Yep.
up. It'll be recorded. You can play this back. So yeah,
Yeah. And I would say, like, up next, I think episode number 4 would be really interesting, where we revisit security. And so go ahead and make sure you're registered for that session. We will dive into network security and actually securing connectivity from a pod in your AKS cluster to Azure OpenAI, all using virtual networking. And then I'm excited for this. We'll be deploying the application gateway for containers using Gateway API. So yeah. What else do you have going on, Steve?
and is this the last episode in the series?
It is the last episode, unfortunately.
Good to know. Good to know for all the viewers out there. So
Yeah.
and yeah, Paul, take us home.
Yeah. So hopefully we're having, tons of fun with Azure Kubernetes and AKS. Just want to remind folks that are going to be in or attending KubeCon or in the Chicago area, go ahead and register for AKS Day. It is a free event. Space is limited. So if you are in the area, go ahead and register for that. I myself will be at KubeCon. Steve, will you be at KubeCon?
I'll be at KubeCon as well, hanging
Nice.
out sessions, and yeah.
Nice. Aren't they, are they doing something at the booth?
Oh,
Um,
yeah. Thanks for reminding me. So, I wrote a book on AKS.
nice.
You might see it behind there on the wall, the cover. But yeah, we'll be giving away copies of the book at the booth. I think there's 10 copies, and then I'll have some copies that I'll be running around with at the conference too. So if you see me, um, let me know. I'll give you a copy. Maybe I'll have some left. So.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Steve Buchanan, for being our special guest today. Appreciate you being here, and appreciate Steve Morosky in the background handling our chat. So
Thanks,
with that,
Steve.
thanks, everybody. See you later.